Okay, before I begin, let me say that none of this has anything to do with Nintendo or Mario Tennis Aces. I just wanted some footage of a sports game, and this was all that I had. I guess I prefer a game that doesn't try to nickel and dime me. But enough about poking fun at EA. Here's a big trial you might be overlooking, as most of the US is concerned about an alcoholic possible rapist becoming a Supreme Court justice. Beginning yesterday as of recording, the trial of United States v. Gatto et al. Has begun. What does it deal with? Well, wire fraud and money laundering mostly. But it's where the money was going that is of interest. You see, the primary defendant, James Gatto, happens to be an executive for athletic clothing company Adidas. The money in question was presumably being funneled to players in order to steer them to specific schools, the specific schools being affiliated with Adidas, like Arizona and Louisville. Money would also be given to coaches to steer players to specific agents if they turned pro, Christian Dawkins in particular, who is alleged to have worked with Gatto in this scheme. The agent would then push for them to sign sponsorship deals with Adidas, who would make money off the player that they would use on the next player, starting the cycle over. The feds have been keeping tabs on this starting as late as 2016 with the arrest of Marty Blazer, a Pittsburgh-based financial planner. Blazer was caught by the SEC for embezzling $2 million from athletes. He pled guilty and agreed to become an informant, opening up the corrupt world of college basketball to the FBI. Now, the important thing isn't necessarily if these guys will be behind bars. Legal experts believe the sentences could be in the months, maybe going as high as 5 years. The reason is that the prosecution has to not only prove that money was lost from other institutions, but how much money was lost. If found guilty, sentencing would get tricky. No, the important thing is seeing how the NCAA responds to all of this. There are two major money sports in college athletics, and men's basketball just happens to be one of them. A few assistant coaches have already been arrested, and several high-profile schools have been implicated, including Arizona, Louisville, Miami, Maryland, Kentucky, USC, Kansas, and Texas, all of whom were implicated to varying degrees. It should be noted that the NCAA typically shies away from handing down heavy punishments, see things like the North Carolina academic scandal and the Nevin Shapiro Ponzi scheme giving money to Miami. But they may have to be heavy-handed this time around, particularly with at least one school. Back in 2015, Louisville was caught paying prostitutes for services given to several players and recruits. As part of their penalty, Louisville vacated a national championship and was placed on probation. Per NCAA rules, should a school be found in violation during their probation, they would be subject to suspending operations for the offending athletic events. This rule, the death penalty as it is commonly known, has only ever been used once for the SMU football team. Southern Methodist University, along with other institutions in their conference at the time, were giving money to high-level prospects to play at their school. It was during this time that the NCAA created the rule in order to curtail violations in this area. Unfortunately for SMU, they didn't take the hint and were forced to stop football operations for at least 1 year in 1987. They were allowed to start back up in 88 but had issues fielding a team, opting to wait until 89 before competing again. SMU wouldn't make a bowl game until 20 years later. Now, the NCAA may be wary of handing the death penalty to Louisville basketball because of this, but it should be noted that SMU was caught up in an inopportune moment in time. In 1994, the Big Eight Conference was looking to expand by adding 4 teams from the Southwestern Conference, SMU's conference. The teams they chose were Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and Baylor. It's possible that had SMU not received the penalty, they would have not only kept their high-profile team, but also could have been added into what became the Big 12, a conference that is one of the Power 5 conferences in football and basketball, which would have given SMU massive amounts of money and exposure. As for Louisville, no such conference realignment seems to be happening at the moment, and they're already in the Atlantic Coast Conference, another Power 5 conference. Should Louisville be given the death penalty, I doubt they would need 20 years to recover. For one, The money from the ACC would help them recover financially after the 1 or 2 years off. The prestige of being a Power 5 team would still draw recruits and coaches alike, and basketball has higher turnover for top stars than football due to drafting rules, which would allow them to get a team quicker. Given that, Louisville would be back near the top in about a decade at most. But that's just one school, and while schools like, say, Michigan State might get in trouble for a meal, as they were last year, Miami, Arizona, and Louisville seem to be on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And worse for them, each has had at least one assistant arrested so far. The penalties could be severe. Then again, when Miami football and basketball were caught in part of the Shapiro Ponzi scheme, they lost 9 total football scholarships over 3 years, as well as a self-imposed 1-year bowl ban, while basketball lost 1 scholarship per year in that time frame. This after as many as 72 players and coaches for both sports were suspected of receiving benefits that include monetary donations, among other things. And whether these things happened during their 3-year probation that was also levied could also lead to questions of how severe they get penalized. At the very least, it should be a fascinating follow as we see in detail how the recruiting cycle worked. And for the NCAA, it could be rather informative. As Atlanta-based lawyer and NCAA rules specialist Stu Brown put it, quote, "It's in the NCAA's interest to see if, essentially, the feds can do their work for them," end quote. Oh, and if you're wondering if Nike might be next, well, trust me, they are. And that is it for this edition of Snap Talk. Sorry about deviating from games today, but I found this whole thing too fascinating to skip over. But if you liked what you heard, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. If you have differing opinions, leave a comment below and we can talk about it. I'm Jeff from Some Nerdy Arguments, and I promise something gaming related next time.